Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, giving you the edge you need to get into the colleges of your dreams. With your host, Steve Schwartz. That's me. Today we're talking with Milyon Trulove, who's the Reed College Vice President and Dean of Admission and Financial Aid. Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, Milyon. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Steve. I'm really glad to be here. This is fun.
Thanks so much for joining us. Now, obviously, we're very excited to be speaking with you today because you're actually currently working in the Office of Admissions at Reed College. Tell us a little bit about how you got there.
Oh, my path to Reed. I think it's pretty interesting. I attended a college in Northfield, Minnesota, St. Olaf College, years ago. And my college search into college was fairly interesting. I didn't think I would know how to figure everything out. As a matter of fact, I was one of those candidates that didn't turn in anything until June. But I had a really good connection with an admission professional there who helped me figure it out. And that had real lasting effect on me, that and communications that I had with students there. So when I went to St. Olaf, I worked in the admission office. My admission counselor was my boss. And I spent a lot of time with him learning the ropes. By the time I graduated, I was interning in the admission office, and I thought, man, this gig is just pretty cool. It brings out a lot of different sides of you. You communicate with people. If you're social, that's fantastic. You're helping people. There's a real creative side. There's a writing side. Just about anything you want to do, you're going to find it in this profession. And so once I graduated, I worked in the social service field for a bit, but it wasn't long before I came back as an admission counselor. And after many years of being there, before I moved on, I was managing the recruitment process. I was managing the admission counselors. I felt like I was helping a lot of students. I left St. Olaf to work for an MBA program. So I did graduate admission for about two and a half years. And I was even surprised at how much I had an affinity for these students. They were grown-ups. When you're helping high school students, you think, wow, this is really great. I'm helping them figure out what they want to do with their lives. It felt very similar when I was working with students who wanted to go on in graduate studies for business. But I really felt a longing. I wanted to get back to undergrad. And so I moved back into undergrad at a local university called Hamline. And while at Hamline, I felt like I got to help more students than I got to help anywhere previously. It was a huge impact. They were really great people. For many years, my family and I have always talked about moving somewhere else. So as you've heard, most of my experiences in Minnesota. I even interned at McAllister College, which is in Minnesota. And I said, you know what, there are a few areas in the country that would be really interesting. Portland sounds kind of fun. And Reed College, I was familiar with it because I had friends here. It's a college that changed lives. This is a group of schools identified by Lauren Pope, who was a well-respected education author. And he said, these are places that are pivotal in the experiences of students to help them figure out what they want to do with their lives. To help them look beyond the Ivy League for places that are really great. And before I knew it, this was my home. And from everything I've seen, it's everything I expected. The students are engaged. And it really does bring something out of them that causes them to be a very different person walking out after 4 years than the person who walked in. And that's how I ended up at Reed.
Oh, wow, Milyon, that's really something. So you've bounced around a few different colleges. Now you've ended up at Reed. And when you started, you were interning at a college in the admissions office. What were some of the things that most surprised you when you first got into this?
You know what? One of the things that surprised me in particular was how much you would incorporate data into your daily processes. And so, as any family know, they're expected to take the ACT and the SAT. They're expected to submit their grades. But there's a whole nother component to what we do, which is used to help us get the messages to families that they need most, and that's most compelling. And so there's a whole side to what we do that's based in technology. That was somewhat unexpected. As a student, I was really accustomed to the relationship building, but not as much the information that really resourced the type of stories that I told when I was a student.
Sure. So the data, I assume you mean more like analyzing the raw numbers, like students' test scores, their GPAs, what part of the country they're applying from, that sort of thing. Anything else in that category?
Yeah. So, if you are really observant, students send really clear messages through their behavior. If a student visits campus, they are going to be more likely to apply to a school. It makes sense, but that can be verified quantitatively. If a student engages the admission office more often than not, in general, students tend to have a higher level of interest and tend to decide to attend your school versus another school more often than not. But it also tells you what you're not talking about. And these are things that your school might do really well. And so if you ask students why they chose other schools and why they chose you, and say that you have a really fantastic social work department, if folks are saying, I'm going to this other school for social work, that means you're not really communicating the quality of your program very well. And that's an opportunity. And I think at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that people find a place they can be for 4 years. And part of that is making sure that we have the information provide for them to make that informed decision. And if we're not doing that, some of this data really helps uncover that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, like one thing you said to me there really stuck out for a second, which is something I'm always telling students, which is the yield. Colleges care about their yield. Mm-hmm. What percentage of students who apply will choose to actually go there if they are accepted? So things like visiting a school, make sure you sign in the registration book, make sure they know that you went, and emailing the admission office, calling that, all that stuff, can get recorded, and that's to your benefit. Mm-hmm. You have to make sure the colleges know. The other thing that you said that was really interesting to me is the fact that, maybe if a school has a strong social work department, they're not going to end up, getting enough applicants necessarily. They need to be doing more marketing on that end. So definitely schools are analyzing, what percentage of students are indicating interest in a certain major and, field of study and inquiring about that. So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
It really is. And as long as families understand at the end of the day, our goal is to make them informed decision makers. The thing you mentioned is actually somewhat of a topic of controversy, which is demonstrated interest. I had a conversation with a group of high school counselors who did not like the idea of colleges taking into consideration how interested a student may be in their school. And I think that's tough. So you'll hear a lot of schools saying that that's something they don't do. And I certainly believe that to be true in some cases. But if you take a look, every year, College Board, NACAC, this is the National Organization for Admission Counselors. They do a survey for colleges and they say, hey, what's important to you? What are you really taking into consideration? If you look over the last 15, 20 years, you'll see this component called demonstrated interest grows and grows and grows. And things like class rank actually goes down. And so it really is a thing, and it's something that colleges, a good number of colleges pay attention to.
Oh, definitely. It's a tricky issue, but for sure applicants need to be thinking about what's going to be in their best interest at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
For sure. Could you walk us through a little bit of, the application cycle for Reed, just in terms of, the year-round application cycle, marketing the school, reviewing applications. What's the timeline like for you?
Absolutely. I think most of our students apply using the regular decision process. And I think that's true at most schools. And that is something that, the deadline for regular decision is January 15th. But so many critical activities happen before that. I find that students who are engaged in the process, even as early as their junior year, are often put in the best position to make themselves competitive for admission. So in your junior year, students will often start to make initial visits to schools. They'll start to visit schools visit the admission representative that goes to their high school. At the end of the year, they'll often take the standardized test. I think the sweet spot for taking that ACT or SAT, if a student takes it more than once, and I would suggest they take it at least twice, is at the end of the junior year, beginning of the senior year. There just seems to be, in my experience, an improvement between the time span between the two. But most of those test scores for us come from students. We start communicating with them over the summer. And then at the beginning of the school year, we do a lot more engagement, which means we're on the road meeting with folks at college fairs in the high schools. We're doing individual interviews for seniors who really want to tell us their story. And our early decision, this is the process that's binding. If a student applies early decision, they're saying a school is their first choice. We have about 250 students that apply who say, if I'm admitted, I'm going to commit myself to attending Reed. After that process and notification, we move into regular, and the reading timeline for Reed and for other selective schools is quite long. So between the months, for the months of January, February, and March, we're reading a lot of applications. We're making tough decisions. And then we announce those decisions around April 1st to let folks know if they've received admission. And then an engagement happens again. Students make their final decisions. They're usually focused on academic programs. So families will visit. And then May 1st, the national reply date, is when people will say yay or nay. This is the place I'll go. Or this is the place that, it's been a great experience, but you're not for me.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Milyon. Definitely of interest to our listeners out there. One thing you mentioned that I want to go into a bit more detail on is, the essay review process and the fact that, application review, that selective schools will spend more time reviewing applications. Mm-hmm. I know you guys are part of the Colleges That Change Lives list, which is a great list of colleges that I'll link to in the show notes and highly recommend. Great. I'm wondering, to what extent you guys might review essays or applications differently than some of the larger schools. I'm thinking I'm not going to name any specific ones, but just large schools, mm-hmm. thousands of applicants. They might not have as much time to look at essays or applications in detail and might have to filter more based on the numbers. How do you guys approach it?
That's a really great question. And I think our approach actually has to do with the fact that Reed doesn't participate in college rankings like U.S. World News. It's a long way to say that it becomes critically important for us to evaluate a student and the way in which they'll contribute to our community. And Reed is a place where lives the life of the mind. And this intellectual community really requires a student to display that somehow through this application. And one of the best ways to do that is through an interview or through an essay. What I always tell folks is if you can't visit a college campus, that essay is your conversation with the admission committee. And we take that very seriously. Very long way to say that. We probably put more weight on the essay than what might always be typical. So we're paying less attention to, let's say, how selective we want to be, but rather the community we want to build. And a way that someone can talk about or communicate how they'll fit into the community or what they'll contribute to the community is through that essay.
Essay is a big factor, and it's definitely the most bang for an applicant's buck in terms of time invested, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Classes in high school, you're spending, tons of hours just for one specific letter grade, but the essay will be a large part of the application, but take a lot less time to work on.
Well, you put a lot into it. And there's another component of this. Schools will often ask a question and it sounds something like this. Why do you want to attend, my college, Reed College? And it is an extra writing piece. It's tricky because it doesn't look as though it's as substantive as that first essay. But in actuality, it's wildly important. I'll say times that we sit down at the table and there's students that are fairly well matched and we have a hard time making a decision. We'll go to that why Reed or that institutional essay to really help us make a final decision. And so in addition to that essay, I encourage students to keep an eye out for a why, University of Chicago essay or why, I'm not sure if the institution has one, but an essay like that, and really be thoughtful about it. communicate that you understand what the school has to offer, and think about how your personality or your experiences match with that school, and communicate that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, like I said before, we talked about, coming back to that yield, you want to make the school confident that you will go there if accepted, that you've done the homework, that you've done the research, or even if you can't visit the school, going to the website and browsing around a bit to get an idea of some extracurriculars or specific professors you might want to study under. All of that really does matter.
It really does. I even suggest that students, when you're on the website, don't go to the admission website. Go to the student affairs website, or read about the school and what activities they have to offer. And it gives you a different flavor.
Oh, definitely. It gives you an idea of what's actually going to be happening there. What's life going to be like once you go there, if you're accepted. And maybe it can teach you something. Maybe it can teach you that maybe you don't want to be at that school after all.
Well said. Well said.
No, thanks so much for sharing that advice, Milyon. Really appreciate it. One thing we love to hear on College Admissions Toolbox are stories. Could you take us to the worst moment in time that you've seen or experienced in the college admissions process?
Yeah. This was a story I was very closely associated to. So just imagine you're in the throes of reading a college application, sitting at your dining room table, and we often do this at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning in some cases, depending on the deadline. And you get the great envelope that is entitled Essay Enclosed, and you open it up and turn it upside down, and you get this really great essay, possibly, but it's in puzzle pieces.
Wow.
And the last thing you want to do at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning is put together an essay piece by piece. And so, that's a particular low point. It's the thing I would say is, creativity is appreciated. Creativity and moderation is even better.
Sure, definitely.
So that might be an area where you want to play it safe.
Yeah, for sure. Now with the rise of online applications, at least people won't be doing that quite as often, right?
That's true. It is, it's always, we're always looking for creativity. And so there's this immense pressure for students just to, do anything they can to stand out. And so finding ways to do that effectively, I think that's the challenge.
Are there any applications you've seen recently, or any that come to mind, where applicants were creative in a constructive way?
Yeah, one of my favorite essays, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a student that I had worked with. He wrote an essay about how he would get to know the admission counselor, which was me. And he went on to describe this experience of meeting at his favorite location in Minneapolis, Minnehaha Falls, and whipping out this bowl of his favorite cereal. He talked about why the falls were important to him, why the cereal was important to him, and just suggested we sit down over this bowl of cereal at my favorite spot, and we'd have this wonderful conversation. And, that's really lived with me for years. And I literally can see it in my head, as I'm telling you the story right now. But what I finally come to realize was that I walked away from reading that essay understanding who he was and how he would contribute to the community and how sincere he was. And, it's not very complicated. It's actually very simple. But he captured his voice in a way that I recall years and years later.
Oh, wow. No, that's really incredible. I mean, it really just goes to show that you can write an essay about literally anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And make a compelling case for just who you are and make them want to meet you, right?
I think you're right, Steve. You're right on.
That's a great story. I heard one story about, an applicant who wrote a college essay about the sound of the crunching leaves as fall was approaching. Yeah. And you step on that leaf, you hear it crunch, and then something's in the air, something's different. It's fall now.
Wow. Yeah. You know what? I think storytellers own the world. I think if someone is able to tell a story in their essay, forget about it. I mean, you're good. And so, what you've described is that story, and that's the way that our imagination comes to life. That's the way that we connect to another individual. And so as much as possible, there's, of course, this formulaic pattern to a typical essay. But if you're able to tell a story and tell it well, I think that's really power in your hands.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well said. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I want to shift gears now and move into my favorite part of the interview, which is the lightning round.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. You give me some rapid fire responses. Are you ready?
Okay, let's do it.
Great. What's your number one piece of advice for the college admissions process?
It's got to be don't freeze up because of a price tag. I think oftentimes folks see how much a school is and they say, nope, not me. Even if they love it, even if they've dreamed about it, you never know how much a school is going to cost until March, until April. Go for it, apply. And then when you're sitting at a table with all these schools, then you can figure out, is it worth how much it is? And you might say, absolutely, now that I've learned more about it, or you might say, absolutely not, going with this place instead.
No, absolutely. And you don't always know when you're applying what financial aid you might end up getting. Not every applicant's going to be paying the price listed on the website. So it's just something applicants need to keep in mind, not to be intimidated by that necessarily.
So very true.
Thanks for sharing that one. Could you share with us one habit that you believe contributes to college admissions success?
Yeah. You know what? Students have to be attentive. They have to pay attention to the process. They have to pay attention to their grades. They have to pay attention to deadlines if they're for scholarships or financial aid. They really have to pay attention to making sure that they connect with that person, the other side, who's going to be a member of the admission committee to tell their story. And I think when we're distracted and we're not paying attention to schools, particularly if they're our top choice, I think that things get really difficult. And it's never too late to start paying attention. But it requires attention. It requires focus.
Definitely. You got to be detail oriented. There's a lot of information to review, but it's important information.
It sure is. It sure is.
Definitely. What's one online college admissions resource that you absolutely love?
Oh, well, can I tell you one I don't love? Well, okay. I'll tell you one I love. I'll tell you one I don't love. And this, because I don't love doesn't mean I hate it. I think College Confidential is really tricky for families. I kind of think it's the WebMD of the college search.
Definitely.
When folks look up a condition and they read all the bad news and they think, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. I think sometimes open format feedback might be inclined to not always give people a full perspective. And it's certainly insightful in many ways. But I just think it's really tricky for families. And it should not be an exclusive resource in my opinion.
Oh, definitely not. There's a lot of unfiltered information in there. Anyone can post. You don't necessarily know if the information's correct.
Right. And one of my favorites, believe it or not, is just, I really like the Princeton Review website. As I mentioned before, we don't participate in rankings, and so we don't participate in their rankings portion. But what's a little bit different about their website is two things. They have surveys. And so this isn't calculated information. This is actual information from the current students and their opinion of their current institution. And for me, that's actually fairly reliable and authentic. And the second thing is it's just really easy to find out information about schools. You plug in, what majors are you thinking about? What size do you want? What cost do you want? Any components like that. And it comes up with a pretty good list of schools and in a fairly unbiased way. And it's comprehensive, easy to navigate. That's actually one of my favorites.
No, it's definitely a great one. It's useful. It's comprehensive. It's everything you need. I'll link to it in the show notes for sure.
Excellent.
Thanks for sharing that one. What's one book that you believe no college applicant should be without?
Oh, I'm totally going to be biased on this. Lauren Pope, individual I mentioned before, who wrote the book Colleges That Change Lives. He wrote a book before that, and it's called Looking Beyond the Ivy League. It's basically helping folks find a college that's right for them, and without the pressure of thinking that the only schools that exist are Harvard, Yale, Stanford, so on and so forth. It really helps families reorient about what's really important and what's really important to them. And so it's a really relieving way to read about the college search. Looking Beyond the Ivy League by Lauren Pope.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing that one. I'll link to it in the show notes. Definitely, you don't have to go to an Ivy League school to be happy. In fact, for all you know, you might be happier at a non-Ivy.
Absolutely.
So it's good to look beyond that simple list of schools. Colleges That Change Lives and Looking Beyond the Ivy League are both great books. We'll link to them in the show notes for sure.
That's great.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Milyon. Really enjoyed speaking with you. You shared a lot of useful advice and information. What's next for you? I'm really thinking about sort of the conversations that we've talked to today. It's part of the benefit of having had a variety of experiences in the admission arena. You kind of understand why some schools have some challenges, why some are doing well. So I'm actually working on a professional resource for other schools on identifying what's distinctive and what's compelling about your institution. It's going to be a great resource for professional colleagues, by professional colleagues. And so my goal is to really help folks figure out how they can bring the best out of their schools. Oh, wow. That sounds like a great project. Excited to see what you do with that. Absolutely. Well, this was great, Milyon. Thanks again for doing this. Really appreciate your time. Steve, I had a lot of fun talking to you. Thanks for giving me this time to talk to your audience. I wanted to give you guys a few quick tips on starting your college essay because I've been getting some questions about getting over writer's block and finally choosing a topic. Writing college essays is really, really hard. I spent months thinking about college essays, but felt like I was getting nowhere when it came to actually getting started. I mean, it's not easy to start writing a college essay that's supposed to show admission officers who you really are. One of the most effective ways I found to help students finally start their essays is by telling them not to start at the beginning. Instead, I recommend using a strategy called free writing. It's pretty simple, kind of stream of consciousness. You just write down any random ideas as they come to you. Then you figure out how to connect them and edit them later. So if you think of something, anything at all, that you think might work well for your essay, just write it down. Don't think about whether it's good or bad, or whether it'll work or not. Just get it all down on paper or on the computer. I've seen so many students write the best sentences of their essays only after they do a lot of free writing. And when you write, you can use any style that works for you. Bullet points, an outline, or even just a word or two. Another strategy that really works is to use writing prompts. They're really a great tool to help you get started and make it a lot easier. I don't know if you've ever done Mad Libs, maybe as a kid, but it's kind of similar to those. For those of you who've never used writing prompts before, I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. They could be sentences as simple as, I enjoy learning about X because Y. Here's another one. A global issue that excites me is X because Y. I know these might sound kind of lame, but really, don't knock it till you've tried it. Doing a bunch of these can really help get your creative juices flowing. So I've put together a ton of writing prompts and also some lists of questions to get those juices flowing so you can finally get started with your college essay. These tools can really help you if you're having trouble getting motivated or if you're unsure about what to write about. These are just some of the resources I've put together in a premium course to help you write effective college essays. You can get access to all of these resources and sign up for the college essay course at collegeadmissionstoolbox.com/essays. Thanks for listening to College Admissions Toolbox. Head over to www.collegeadmissionstoolbox.com to get more free tools and resources that will help you get into the colleges of your dreams.